Hey guys, and welcome to another video. Today, finally, I will be checking out the S3 Virge 3D graphics card. Infamously, it is called the 3D decelerator, and yeah, we will definitely have a look at the performance, but there's a lot more to this video card. It's all about the context and the year of 1996. I was a huge S3 fan. I had the S3 Trio 64 PCI video card, but I did not buy the S3 Verge, and the reason is because the PC Player magazine, which was sort of my go-to information resource, they told me do not buy this video card. In 1996, I was living in Austria and going to high school, and I did buy all sorts of PC hardware back in those days, and many times I did get caught out. For example, with the 486 DLC processor, which was basically just a CPU for a 386 mainboard with some boosted performance. And another purchase, it was a sound card, a Spear Media FX, which promised to have Adlib, Sound Blaster, MT32 and General MIDI, but it didn't even have a FM chip. So after those frustrating purchases, I started to read more, and the PC Player magazine out of Germany, it really resonated with me. They of course reviewed games, but also hardware. Here we have the magazine from January of 1996, and I just want to show you, to give you a bit of context. They are recommending two video cards for DOS gaming. Windows gaming wasn't a thing at the time, and the main recommendation was the S3 Trio 64 video chip. Here is a video card from Elsa, and if you had a bit more money to spend and you wanted to get even more performance, you could get the Metrox Millennium video card. I really like this page. We have here an overview of the hardware back in those days, 1 to 5, starting with a 486-33 up to a Pentium 133. So if you had a Pentium, you could consider yourself as quite fortunate. And in this video, we will put together a test system and test the S3 Verge with a Pentium 75, 133 and 200 megahertz, and then later on we use a much faster Athlon 64 just to see if a faster processor helps change the outcome. The S3 Verge has been reviewed many times. There are many videos out there, and it is true, the performance is really not that great. Here we are on the Vintage 3D.org website, and they've done a fantastic job benchmarking this video card at different resolutions. We can see a couple of interesting facts here. The video card out of the box, most have only 2 megabytes of VRAM, which is the case with my card. If you upgrade it to 4, you can see a slight performance boost in some of the games. You can also see that most of these results here are in the single digit performance range. Some of them are quite high, but if you look at the details, well, they're running at 320 by 200, and that is basically VGA resolution. Even 3D accelerated with smoothed out textures, it still looks very rough and raw. So for me, 3D graphics, it has to be running at 640 by 480. There's a really good article from May of 1996, and here they are interviewing Joe Tretinick from S3, who of course, well, his job is to hype up the potential of this video card. And some of the interesting points he talks about, well, that S3 has the manufacturing capacities that other some of those newcomers do not have. He also talks about that 20 titles are planned with support for the video card, and up to around 50 games should support the video card by Christmas. And then there's a lot of talk about Direct 3D. This was the era where games started to move away from MS-DOS and running under Windows 95 with Direct 3D. Unfortunately, there were delays. We can see the frustration coming through in this article from the July magazine. The reasons for the delay are issues with the games They're writing that many of these games have, you know, their own 3D APIs under DOS, so to then make them get accelerated with a 3D card is not that straightforward, but there are also issues with Windows and Direct 3D. In October of 1996, they tested a range of video cards which were now available with the latest drivers at the time and a range of games, and it was just a total disaster. The article is named Bad Cards, and yeah, it's a real disaster. Many of the video cards have really poor drivers. They're testing various games, getting all sorts of error messages. They are also testing some of the DOS compatibility, but there are issues with the VESA 2.0 support. And the conclusion, there's a nice summary here at the end where Boris Schneider basically says, yeah, I can't believe it. It's a total disaster with Direct 3D, and out of all the video cards, none of them really deliver on the promises. In November 1996, and remember how S3 promised 50 games with support for the S3 Virge by Christmas. Well, in November 1996, the drivers have slightly improved, so they wrote a follow-up article which seemed a lot more positive. It had a positive tone to it, a lot more of the games worked. Some drivers even had sort of an option where you could trick the game into thinking the video card would support a certain feature, but then it wouldn't in order to give you better performance. So it was still quite messy, but the real problem was in this month another video card launched, and it's nothing other than the 3DFX Voodoo. And this video card, well, it was basically game over for the competition. The main video cards like Matrox and S3, they came from being traditional 2D accelerator chips, and then they tried to add 3D on top of them, whereas with the 3DFX Voodoo, they came from an arcade background. They had really high-end 3D graphics, and they tried to reduce it down. How can we make it cheap enough to sell a consumer card? And it just wiped the floor with the competition. So I'm hoping that this look back to 1996 gives us a bit of context, because yeah, you have to appreciate what S3 was trying to do. 3D graphics, 3D accelerated graphics for the masses. They did follow up with a few faster models, but I don't think the performance is that much greater compared to the 3DFX Voodoo, and then later, of course, what we saw from NVIDIA and from ATI. And now I want to see what this card can do with my own eyes. Let's start with putting together a test system. To keep it period correct, we're going with the Socket 7 platform. Asus SP97XV is the motherboard, SIS chipset, and we have a Pentium Classic 200 MHz, which I downclock at various speeds. 32 GB SSD with a SATA to ID adapter, Gotek floppy emulator, and for sound, the AWE64 value. For software, we're using Windows 98 SE. Now, this operating system does have drivers integrated, but they don't work well with games. You want to install better drivers. We're using the driver version 3.12.01 as well as DirectX 7. We're starting testing with the Pentium clocked at 75 MHz. The built-in 3D test of the Direct 3D diagnostics looks promising. We're getting single-digit FPS in software mode, and when we switch to hardware acceleration, we're getting over 40 FPS. So it looks promising in this benchmark. This is Tomb Raider 640 by 480 in software mode. It's a slideshow. The CPU really struggles. So you can copy a patch into the game directory for the S3 Virge. The game is now accelerated. There are some options you can change, like the resolution and settings with the filtering, and it does run a little bit better. You can hit the F2 key, you get an FPS counter, but it's sitting in the single digits. So I wouldn't call this smooth. It does run better, it looks nicer, but you have to really run it at 320 by 200 to get playable performance. Croc is the other game I wanted to test. You need to use the retail launch version without any patches to get the native S3 API acceleration. Here again, we can compare the software accelerated version with the S3 Virge version. With the S3 Virge, we're getting nicer graphics, filtering with the textures, but performance, again, it's just not playable in either form, software or hardware accelerated. Let's clock the CPU a little bit higher with a Pentium 133, which, yeah, is very high-end for 1996. And across the board, everything runs a little bit better, just a tiny bit. Tomb Raider, well, still only around 4 to 6 FPS. That's frustrating. A Pentium 133, that would have been a high-end machine back in those days. And then you had to, shell out for the video card, and you only got 6 FPS. So what a disappointment. And in Croc, we can see the same thing. It runs a tad bit better than with the Pentium 75, but it is still basically unplayable. And now on the Pentium 200, Tomb Raider in software mode now starts to run somewhat better. It's definitely not silky smooth, but we are approaching the feeling of, okay, yeah, I can sort of play this game. The S3D mode, well, not much has changed. We're still getting around 5 to 6 FPS. That is a disappointment. Also in the S3D version, we're not getting the shadows at the ground. That is also something the 3dFX Voodoo does better. Let's check out Croc. Same thing, not much has changed. It's still struggling in software mode, but also struggling with the S3D accelerated version. So at least with Socket 7, doesn't matter too much what sort of CPU you have, it seems. Even with the Pentium 200, you're gonna get single-digit performance at 640 by 480. So that means you are forced to compromise, either lowering the resolution or dialing down some of the settings. So we have to find out, what does the 3dFX Voodoo look like on the same machine? This is Croc. We're running at 640 by 480, and finally this game is playable. It's not quite constant 30 FPS. Most of the time it does sit at 30. We have VSync enabled in the driver settings. That is also something I found with the S3 drivers. There's no control panel where you can tweak anything to do with 3D graphics, whereas in the 3dFX Voodoo you get some more options. Tomb Raider with the 3dFX patch now also very smooth, 30 FPS locked most of the time, but we do see some dips below. Still, all in all, with our 3dFX Voodoo, you really got that next generation feeling. I remember vividly, I bought a 3dFX Voodoo because it was recommended in the PC Player magazine, and I had a Pentium 133 and I had an S3 Trio 64, and I just remember when I saw Tomb Raider at 640 by 480, silky smooth, my jaw dropped, and I knew this would change the industry. The reason this video card is called 3D Decelerator is because once the CPU processing power improved, you could run the games faster in software mode compared to using this video card. Now, what if you really want to build a machine with the S3 Virge? You don't care too much about the performance, but of course you want the best out of this card. What about putting together a really fast machine like a Pentium 3 or an Athlon 64? Well, I did just that. The stronger CPU makes a real difference. Here we are back in Tomb Raider 640 by 480, and now it runs a little bit better, sometimes even hitting 10 FPS. Now, you can argue down below in the comments if you consider 10 FPS as playable. I do not, but if you really want to play the S3D version on the original S3 Verge, then having a fast CPU will definitely make the game run a little bit better. S3 made the video chips, so there was a huge variety in quality and features and clock speeds between the different cards you could purchase. This one is clocked rather high, over 70 megahertz, which is nice, but keep in mind it only has 2 megabytes of memory. I didn't have any RAM to upgrade. I didn't have chips with the memory timings to be compatible, so keep that in mind. If you double the RAM to 4 megabytes, some of the games might run a little bit better, but it won't really change the outcome. So for 3D graphics, the S3 Virge really is a horrible graphics card. I planned on, maybe playing a game a little bit more and sharing it with you, but all of the games I tried were basically unplayable. It was just a slideshow and not something I was enjoying, and not something I think you would enjoy either. And there are already many videos out there with gameplay that shows you how horrible this video card performs under 3D. But the story doesn't end here. We have to talk about DOS and 2D compatibility, and this is where the S3 Verge still has some relevance. It contains the 2D core, the same as the S3 Trio 64, highly compatible with DOS games. So that's where I see this video card mostly being used. If you have a PCI only system like a 486 or an early socket 7 machine, and you want to focus mostly on DOS or pair it up with a 3DFX Voodoo card, then this card can still be recommended, but only for 2D. So guys, there you have it. My take on the S3 Verge. Performance really is sad, but you have to put it into context. All the 3D video cards at the time, they basically sucked. The performance was just horrible. They were making very slow progress. And then the 3DFX Voodoo came out and just steamrolled everybody. And many of the famous video chips at the time that disappeared, they did not survive the transition from 2D to 3D. And yeah, so it was an awesome look back, and I'm really happy. I can tick this one off my bucket list. My first time playing with the S3 Verge. And yeah, I hope you found it interesting. Now I want to hear from you. 1996, what were you up to? What hardware did you have? Do you remember the transition from DOS to Windows 95? I do remember it, and I hang on to DOS for a very long time. I wasn't ready to use Windows for gaming. I didn't believe in that whole direct 3D thing, and the first direct 3D games, they weren't that great. It was only with the 3DFX Voodoo where I could see where this is going. However, the games that supported the Glide API under DOS, I still feel like they ran better than under Windows. However, performance exploded at that time. From a Pentium 200, we got the MMX 233, Pentium 2, Pentium 3, and then 3D graphics exploded as well. Higher resolutions, higher FPS, more detail. It was a really fantastic time to be alive. And yeah, that's it for this video. Looking forward to reading your comments over a cup of coffee in the morning. I love doing that. A reason for me to get out early and read your stuff, your thoughts, your ideas, and getting inspired for future videos. Also, I'm on Patreon. If you want to support me, check out the link down below in the video description. And that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. I shall see you soon with another one.